psalm. It's made up of 10 lines, really. The first one, Lamanatseach, is introductory, so it's really made up of 9 lines. We'll see the central 5th line, which is kind of a turning point, a pivot in the poem. The poem starts out, Hashem Adonenu, Ma dir shimcha b'chol ha'aretz, how great, how majestic, how great, Adir is your name on all of the earth. And then it adds, Asher tanahotcha l'shamayim, you who have covered the heavens with your splendor. We'll see that the last line of the poem repeats this, though with a difference. We'll talk about that in a minute. Mipi olulim, from the mouths of infants and sucklings, the yonkim, yisadata oz, you established strength, power for your enemies to destroy. It's a nice translation, the revenging enemy. The revenging enemy. I always think of Satan from Paradise Lost when I see the revenging enemy in David's Psalms. So how is it possible that from the mouths of infants, God creates or bounds power? So I think there are 2 approaches to take. The first is that this moment of a mother nurturing her child is a primary moment of chesed. It is the prime moment of chesed. And from this activity, everyone should acknowledge that the world is created according to chesed. I mean, it's really the female love for her child. Another possibility is that this is about language. That is, how does God create his power and strength in the universe? You can tell I like this one better. It's through language, even the language of the gurgling infant, the gesture towards speech. Think of Augustine thinking when he was little, gesturing towards speech, trying to talk. The two pshatim, again, 1, this primal act of chesed, and 2, through language, God creates, or man creates strength from the mouth of infants. Goes on and says, Ki shemecha ma'ase etzbosecha yarech v'cholchavim asher konanta. You will, when I behold, the key is, when I behold your heavens, the work, maaseh, of your fingers, and it's very palpable here, the divine hand. We're really going almost all the way with the kind of literalism here, seeing the divine hand create the moon and the stars, which he had set, which he had prepared. There's repetition we'll see in the psalm of preparing something, of making something. And here's the turning point. What is man? What is the anosh? And this is, according to the Gemara, there's another drama that's happening behind the scenes here. It's not only David, it's the angels talking to God at the time of the creation of man and saying to him, what is God? What is man that you remember him? What is man that you make yourself present in? The 2 of those things are obviously related. If you are not remembered by God, you have no kiyum, you have no existence. If you do not have God's attention, I guess the face of God. In the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, you may remember Pakad. God is, he remembers Sarah. The Makzorim, the prayer books for the high holidays have a hard time really translating it. But it is, I think, this idea of attending to and being attentive. Who is mortal man that you take note of him? Hamlet, in a scene with his spying friend enemies, asked this question, what is man? And he starts from the other direction. What is man? He's the paragon of animals. He's God's greatest creation. And then at the end, he's a quintessence of dust. With Hamlet, we see kind of the broadband of the human personality. Quintessence of dust, paragon of animals. Here it's reversed. First is the despair. What is man? That you should remember him. And then it goes on, the taksirehu ma'at me'elohim, and they lack, and that you made him a little you made him a little less divine. I'll go with this translation. He lacks just a little that would make him to be divine, angels divine. For kavod v'hadar ta'ateo, and you wrapped him up in kavod and hadar. What is that? What is that kavod and hadar that a person has? The majestic sense of the human. We've seen it, right? We've seen that kavod hadar. We see it in great people. You see it. It's an aura. It's whatever it is. I mean, you have to use metaphors. This is a metaphor. Tamshileu b'maseh yadecha. And more than that, you made him master. You made him the one who rules over the work of your hands. Kol shata tachas raglav. You threw everything under his legs, raglav. 3 other times in Tehillim, the phrase tachat raglav or raglav occurs. In all 3 other times, it refers to God's feet. I mean, I think it's something idiomatic about that here. But here what's happening is God is giving mastery over his creation, the things that he made to man. And what are those things? And now they're named. Sona, v'alafayim, kulam v'gam behemos sadai. Sheep and oxen, kulam, all of them, v'gam behemot, and also animals of the field, beasts of the field. Look, also, let's read it differently. Sona v'alafim, kulam v'gam. Kulam v'gam is the infinitude, even though we're getting these almost kind of very cartoonish names for the different kinds of creation. And of course, this is a rewriting of Genesis 1. But in the middle is the kulam v'gam, that there's something expansive and unnameable about the world, even though Adam is giving names in Genesis. And here we have David describing what God gives to man. He gives all of these things at his feet. Of course, he gives these entities, but he also gives the names, Sipor Shamayim v'Dagi Hayam, Over Orchot Yamim. There are 2 pshatim here also. Birds and birds who fly around, and Dagi Hayam, and the fish of the sea. Over Orchos Yamim. 2 pshatim again. One, and this is how the literary critic and translator Robert Alter understands it. These are sea creatures. And he points out that the 2 enveloping lines at the beginning of the end create this kind of perfect harmonious whole. And we have all of the creation inside of it. And Orchot Chaim are these sea creatures from top to bottom, the birds, the fish, and then it's all compressed as part of one continuum. But other commentators, also, it's not only Alter, other Rishonim, medieval commentators choose that one. And others say, Orchot Chaim, these are actually people who make boats and travel the world. This idea of sailing, and anybody who's read the Odyssey remembers that sailing is this kind of civilizing activity. This and how shipbuilding. I mean, this is not, you don't see this a lot in Hebraic sources, but certainly in the Odyssey, that shipbuilding is a sign of civilization, both because it requires such mastery to make a ship, and because it also is this cosmopolitan gesture, and meaning going outwards. And I think that is here. That is definitely here. That shot, I mean, I think what's happening here. Now let's watch the last line, and then we'll come back to that. Hashem Adonenu ma'adir shemcha b'chol haaretz. Now, what fell out? What fell out is the second half of the first line. Asher tanahotcha l'shamayim. What has happened here is there has been a kind of devolution, or maybe evolution, depending on how you look at it, from the sovereignty or lordship of God to the sovereignty of man. That at the end, the latter part falls out. In the beginning, we have the first part, we have the hierarchy between God and man. God creates, and man is subordinate to him. Now, once we get to this line, God put all of these things under your feet. So in a way, what's happening here is God is falling out and man is taking center stage. Man here is sovereign. How does he express that sovereignty? He expresses that sovereignty, and now you're hearing line 9, Orchus Yami. But even more, that sovereignty is expressed in another way. Because for David, everything he does, this is about, Tehillim are about war and kings, but Tehillim is about leadership and teaching. And David here is teaching. Hashem Adonenu ma'adir shemcha b'chol haaretz. What does it mean? Ma adir shimcha b'chol ha'aretz. What does it mean that God's name is present all over the world? His name, God's name is on various billboards all over the place. But I think actually what when we talked about David's sovereignty is achieved through naming and through language. God creates his world and names them. And this is rabbinic, that the rabbis say that God creates the world through his diburim, through his things that he says. And man follows suit. Ma'adir Shimcha, this is the naming of the world in relationship to God. What do we mean by that? David teaching. It enacts this, the poem, every psalm enacts this. How is God's name spread through the world? Hashem Adonai ma'adir shimcha b'chol ha'aretz. Learn this psalm, we just spread it. Right? It's so much of what happens in Psalms is determined by naming and language. God creates with his hands, he's a maker. He designs the world. Man also does that. He also, and I think this is why the two pshatim up here are very important, about what this nursing child represents. On the one hand, and you can hear why I liked it so much, because I think this song is about language, and the children are the first to spread the oaths. Even the young people have God's name. What does God's name mean? They speak. They believe in language. They believe in communication. And there's that, and there's that chesed. And also the second pshat. This is God, when he designs the world, he designs a world of chesed, of giving, of openness, of the future. And man, David, the Radak calls him somebody who makes or contrives or designs. When he sings his psalms and his praise and his teachings, he is also creating a world, designing a world which is based upon chesed. How does he do that? With language. Incredible, right? So that was good.